as we try to normalize a mental illness across the board, people that don't necessarily have mental illness see depression as a certain way, and see anxiety as a certain way, and obsessive compulsive as a certain way. And really, they're very much spectrums, I suppose. So one person's depression is very different from someone else's depression, but then begs the question of how depressed are you? And so if you're going to implement like policy changes, is there like, do you have to keep it within a certain like level of depression or something? And a lot of that stigma kind of comes from the mentally ill community. That, you know, I talk about, you know, you may not have obsessive compulsive tendencies if you keep your car super clean, but you actually might. And so who am I to say that your experiences are invalid? Or who am I to say that your depressive tendencies are invalid? And so a lot of the fault actually comes probably from those that have acknowledged mental illness, that you don't have the same experience as me. How could you have the same mental illness as me? But it's difficult when mental illnesses are all on a spectrum and no one has the same experience as one another.
You can be anxious about a situation and not have like anxiety. Like everyone gets anxious at times. Like it's life. And so anxiety is like dealing with like severe generalized anxiety. Like every day, like if now I'm more I have it better under control, but when I'm having like bad days, like it's not necessarily that there's like a constant thought of like something I'm specifically worried about, but you just feel uneasy. Like you just feel like something's wrong, like constantly. Like it's definitely a different feeling than just being like anxious about like an exam or something like that. So I do think that it has gotten kind of twisted about what anxiety really is. And I feel like lately, and like our generation and stuff is trying to push like the importance of mental health more. And so I almost feel like now it went from like rarely being talked about to being like overused now.
I think initially it was kind of shocked that I was even talking about it, or that like people were kind of like, it felt uncomfortable to have a conversation. Not so much that, oh, your symptoms are weird or things like that, but it was just acknowledging that I wasn't okay, but I was still very much functioning. And so I could be this high functioning and successful person, but also acknowledge that I had, big symptoms going on. And so I think it was uncomfortable for people to like acknowledge and like have a conversation about. But beyond that, it became acceptance really quickly. And then people kind of would ask questions, and people that may not have OCD specifically but have other mental illnesses would kind of start talking to me, and we would kind of be able to have these conversations as an advocate. So it was really interesting.
Actually, at the beginning, I feel like going through it is really only like my friends that knew and like my parents. So I feel like I was very like, I still tried to hide it, especially that first semester I was experiencing it. I didn't want anyone to like know, I guess, because I was still like, I think embarrassed almost that like, yeah, I think I was just embarrassed, I guess.
I'm super open about like my struggles with anxiety. Like I think everyone goes through stuff like that. So, I mean, if you look at someone, you can't tell what they're going through. And I feel like I could definitely be someone where like you look and be like, oh, like she looks like she has everything together, when really it's not always like that. So I think college too has definitely showed me the stigma.
Concern that acknowledging you have a mental illness will make you seem less productive or less employable. So I know a lot of people don't talk about mental illness on social media because employers can see it. And it's something that is very much prevalent, and I can certainly appreciate that, but that's also kind of, in my perspective, that's who I am. And so it would be difficult for me to go to an employer and say that I'm totally healthy when I have a mental illness, and it does impact my day-to-day life, but I still can be productive around it.
Since I've gotten to college, I have some friends that have talked to me about how they have anxiety and they're on medication and stuff, but they don't tell anybody about it. And so it really hit me then too, because I was like, oh, well, I'm really open about it. Like I don't like publicize that I'm on medication or whatever, but like I'm super open about like my struggles with anxiety. Like I think everyone goes through stuff like that. So, I mean, if you look at someone, you can't tell what they're going through, and I feel like I could definitely be someone where like you look and be like, oh, like she looks like she has everything together, when really it's not always like that. So I think college too has definitely showed me the stigma.
Definitely.
I don't know that I think that there is a best way to talk about it. I think
just talking about it in general is huge. And that's going to look different for everyone. Some people have their own personal struggles with mental health that they're willing to share, whereas other people are struggling with it but maybe not willing to share that. But I mean, just having a place for those conversations, and I don't mean like a physical place, like we talk about this here, but making room for those conversations at the university, whether that's on a student level, faculty, administrative level. And I think that all of those different groups need to be connected in that conversation as well. It needs to be something that's not whispered about when there's an issue. When students need help, they need to feel comfortable talking to other students, talking to faculty, administrators, staff, whoever they need to talk to in order to get help.
I think kind of just being able to talk about it. I think in men specifically, mental illness is something that's difficult to talk about, and there might be a stigma associated with it just because of gender roles associated with men having to be strong and silent and kind of very in control of their emotions, and mental illness really doesn't care about that. So that's been, I think, an interesting one to kind of see as well.
I still feel like people are like kind of weird about it. Like they just, like I've been called crazy before, like, and really, like I'm not. I just like, I can't help it. And so I think a lot of people just don't want other people to look at them differently. And so I am just I'm pretty open on like my social media and stuff about like my anxiety and stuff. And so I'm just trying to make it be more known that like this is real, like people have it, like anxiety is actually like an epidemic in the US right now. And so like I just want people to realize like it's okay to get help. And so I think people don't want to talk about that kind of, like, people don't want to talk about like anxiety, depression, all this stuff. Like it's college, like no one wants to really like talk about that, but that's something that like needs to be talked about.